Welcome back to the Beautifully Intentional podcast. This is part 3 of our marriage series. And in this episode, I'm just going to kind of break down practical, tangible ways that we show love in our marriage. It's not perfect. It's not it's not perfect, but this is how we do it, because I do get a lot of questions on people that will ask specifically, how do you deal with A, B, or C? And usually all of my answers always bring me back to this one specific way. And so I'm going to dive into that. So listen in. Welcome to the Beautifully Intentional podcast, where I share stories to encourage you to live a more intentional life. Whether it's in your motherhood journey, your friendships, your 9-to-5 job, or pursuing just radical dreams. I believe that sometimes we can just get stuck in the mundane craziness of life, and all it takes is one encouraging word to give us hope to live for something greater. I share stories of living intentional through the simple things like self-care, clean spaces, parenthood, and going after your dreams. My hope is that at the end of every episode, there's a fire set deep within your soul that says, I can do this. And that maybe today is your day to find the beauty in the things that go unnoticed and start living a more intentional life. This is Cassandra Lau, and welcome to Beautifully Intentional. So here we are 13 years later, and we have gone through so many struggles, like financial struggles, loss of friends, loss of a church, death of friends, and adultery, and you name it. We've been through it. We've been through a lot. But we have also gained 3 kids, 2 careers that we love, new friends, a new church, lots of wisdom, lots of patience, trust, and just so much more than we've lost. All because of the commitment that we have both made to each other. And when people ask me how do you still love each other? How are you still together? All the hows. My first thought always goes straight to 1 Corinthians 13. And if you don't read the Bible and you don't know what that reference is, it's a chapter that just describes what love looks like. Because I think that so many of us, myself included, have a fantasy idea that love is a feeling, it's an emotion, it's background music, it's butterflies in your stomach, it's Jack and Kate on the front of Titanic, it's The Notebook, it's Jack and Rebecca from This Is Us. But no, that feeling isn't love. I hate to break it to you, those are emotions. And emotions are cool too, they just aren't love. Those are some of the aspects that happen in the place of love. But love itself is an action. It's a choice. It does something. It looks like something. It's not invisible. It's very much tangible. You can see it. You can hear it. You can, smell it. I don't know. I don't think you can smell it. But before I get started, I also do want to say this about marriage, that marriage is... It's one of those things, it's the only thing that requires the commitment of 2 people in order to work. You could love perfectly, and I'm using air quotes here because it's impossible for any human to love perfectly. But for argument's sake, let's just say that you love your spouse perfectly. It still can't work if your spouse doesn't love you in return. It doesn't have that commitment to you in return, because a marriage takes both people to equally participate. In every area of your life, you have, for the most part, full control over. If you don't like your job, you can get a new one. If your car's busted, you can get it fixed, or you can go get a new one. If your health is a mess, you can change your diet. You can control those areas and then see positive change. You can do things perfectly in your marriage and still not see change if your spouse isn't willing to work equally as hard. And that's just the reality. And that's the reality that we can't control people. We have no control over people. We can only control ourselves and our own actions and our own attitude and what we pour in. So, that's just the unfortunate reality. That's why so many marriages fall apart. It's there's 2 people in the marriage, and at some point, somebody was no longer equally committed to showing love to the other person in whatever way that may be. Marriages fall apart for so many reasons, and it's so many different areas where that lack of commitment was shown, but every marriage that fails is usually at some point it's the lack of commitment and ability to show love to your spouse, whether that's on your side or the other person's side. And so in this episode, I kind of just want to go through some practical, tangible ways that me and Dustin show love or have shown love to one another. And at this point, why I believe we're still here. So I want to go through 1 Corinthians 13 and just take one action at a time and just talk about how that love shows up in me and Dustin's marriage, or how it doesn't, because our love isn't perfect. And so, but these are just some of the lists of like the actions and the tangible ways that love shows up in our home. Also, before I get started, I meant to do this in the beginning, but I am no marriage expert. Like, I want to make that extremely clear. I am no marriage expert. I am not a marriage therapist. I'm not a marriage counselor. I do not have this all figured out. I do not. Like, I'm not like, I have come across a gold mine and I know all the answers. I do not know all the answers at all. All I have is 13 years of experience. That's it. So anything that I say and the examples that I give is how love shows up in my home for us personally. And these are my opinions. These are just my perspective. And I share it with you to give you hope and encouragement. And maybe it's something that you need to do in your own marriage or in your own home. But this is by no means, I don't want to like come across as like, I have this all figured out, because I do not. So anyway, so here we go. So let me just first start off by reading 1 Corinthians 13, what love looks like, right? So it says, love is patient, love is kind. It is not envy. It is not boastful. It is not proud. It is not rude. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no records of wrong. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in the truth. Love never fails. So let's just start off with the first one. Love is patient. Of course, it starts off with a doozy. Am I right? Like, patience. Oh my gosh. This is probably the hardest one for most people. Like, love looks like waiting for things, so many things. For us, when we first met, I was ready to jump into a relationship, but I had to wait for him to work through some relationship stuff before he even wanted to commit to me. I could have easily been like, you're either in or out, but I had to be patient. I'm like, he was going through something. He was processing. He was doing his thing, and I had to be patient and wait for the right timing, or for him to just be ready. Like, I had to be patient in that process. I also had to learn how to be patient with him when he was late, like a practical, just when he was late, because there's not one thing on the planet that gives me more anxiety than being late. Like, I cannot stand it. And homie was born in Hawaii, and he lives on what I learned at the time was called Hawaiian time, which meant that there's no time frame. Hawaiian time means there is no time frame. So early on, I had to learn how to be patient with him because his lifestyle was just different. I had to be patient when I was ready to start having kids 2 months after we got married, and he was like, heck no. I had to be patient and wait for the right timing. Looking back now, I realize I wasn't ready either, but isn't that the beauty of patience, is that timing is everything. And it's so easy for us to rush something that we think we want or that we need at that exact moment. But a lot of times we don't even know that what we're asking for. And then, like, a little more serious example of patience is like I had to wait. It was like I had to wait for trust to be rebuilt after I broke it. Like, we both had to be patient with each other in that season. I had to be patient with him while he rebuilt trust, and he had to be patient with me as I was trying to figure out who the heck I am. It also looks like, waiting for years of pursuing music to pay off financially, and me being patient in that process. Nothing happens overnight. Nothing. And if we are in this for the long haul, then we have to be willing to be patient, including areas of growth. So, it could be anything in our lives, like, waiting on things to get better at work, for finances to turn around, for your family to grow. And it's hard. But if you're committed to your spouse on both sides, if you guys are equally committed to each other, then you have to dig deep and get patience. Like, look for patience, hold on to patience. And patience looks like support in the waiting. It's not nagging, it's not trash talking, it's encouraging and it's uplifting. So that's patience. The next one is love is kind. I feel like this just looks like being nice. Like Dustin cleaning out the litter box, that's nice. Me getting a sitter and planning a surprise date, that's nice. Dustin making lunch for me, that's nice. Me cleaning up his lunch after him, that's nice. Like, love is kind, just doing kind things. It can be notes and flowers, or it can just be cleaning out the car. We used to do like the notes and flowers thing when we were dating, but 13 years in, something nice to me now is just cleaning out the litter box. Like, I'm thrilled. But for you, it could look like 20 years later and you're still doing the notes. Like, something, it's just simple kindness. Just be nice. Just be nice to your spouse. Like, I see people that are just so mean sometimes. Like, I think of it as how would I want another kid to treat my child, right? Like, I would want them to be kind. Like, I don't want somebody being mean to my kids. So I have to be willing to treat my spouse with the same kindness. You know what I mean? So anyway, the next one is, it does not envy. You know, I know for me, it would have been super easy to be envious of Dustin when he was traveling the world and I was staying home with the kids. Like, I remember this specific time where Dustin was traveling. I think he was in Paris, right? And I was at home, pregnant, had the flu. I'm throwing up into a toilet or a sink. Zuri is like 3 years old and she is standing behind me, mimicking me throwing up, like making the same throwing up sounds as I was making. And then I have Amelie, who is probably in a poopy diaper, bawling her eyes out, and I'm pregnant with Jet. Like, what is my life? And then Dustin is FaceTiming me in front of the Eiffel Tower, like, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful here. And he's eating like the most amazing foods, and it would be so easy to be envious. But envy is just, it is ugly. And it would have just caused like just an ugly root in our relationship as far as when it comes to me supporting him and what he was doing. Like, what he was doing was incredible. So I have to find a way that even when my season of life does not look as glamorous as his, to not be envious. Because envy is just ugly. The next one is, it does not boast. I will never claim to you, but especially not Dustin, that I love perfectly. Like, watch your words and watch what you're boastful about. I choose to not say things like, I do so much around the house, or I work so much harder than you, or I make more money than you, because that may be true in some seasons. But he sure did clean more when I was on bed rest for 6 weeks of my third pregnancy. And he sure cooks more than me every night of the week. And he sure has made more money than me when I was a stay-at-home mom for 5 years, making $0. So watch what you're boastful about, because there may come a time when you have to be humbled in that exact area. So anytime I feel that feeling rising up of like, I do more, I remember that there are seasons where he has to do more. Or if there's like a season where I make more, it's like, I know that there's a season where he makes more, or you know what I mean? So always just putting in perspective, as soon as you feel that like boastful, like want to throw it in your spouse's face of all the things that you do, just watch that, because there will come a time, and hopefully not, maybe not, but for the most part in life, there will come a time where you need to be humbled in that exact area, and you will need your spouse to show up for you in the areas that you think that you have it all together in, you know? The next one is, it is not proud. You know the old saying, like, pride comes before the fall. I mean, I am more aware now than I have ever been in my whole life that anything can happen in any marriage. Like, no marriage is above falling. And I'm not, it's just not. And if every single marriage that I have ever looked up to Like I would have bet my actual dollars, my actual money on certain marriages making it to the end. And just about all of those are divorced today. And that tells me that I'm no different than them. Those were people that I looked up to that I thought had it all together. And I'm no different than them. So I am fully aware that we are not above failure. So I let that drive me to investment. Like, what can I do today to invest in my marriage? Because pride will blind you to the point of not being able to see your own faults or to see the needs of your spouse. I'm telling you, it's so easy to blame your spouse, but blame is rooted in pride. So it says that like, I'm better than you, or that, I have this figured out and you don't, but you have faults. And pride is rooted in that, like, you have faults and I don't, but we all have faults. So I encourage you that if you're feeling like a sense of pride in your marriage of something that you're doing that's better that your spouse is not, I encourage you to look inward and look at where you might have your own faults that maybe need to be worked on. Okay, the next one is, it is not rude. This one is simple. I feel like it's just not being ugly with your words. Like, don't say things that you don't mean. And even if you do mean them, maybe don't say them. And if you feel like your spouse is saying something that is rude, it's okay to like call that out and say, hey, like that felt a little rude. Just communicate when you have that feeling of feeling disrespected by words, but always making it a point to be intentional about not saying rude things. And the next one is, it is not self-seeking. I think this looks like asking your partner what they need. Dustin is really good at this. I'm not so good at this, but he is always asking, like, what do you need? Like, is there anything I can help you with? Is there anything you need me to do today? Like, he meets my tangible needs because that's my love language. I'm not so good at asking him what he needs. Like, I more show up in our marriage as the supporter of passions and things like that, and encouragement, and like make sure that he feels supported. But that is my way of not being self-seeking, because I'm thinking about him and what like he needs from me and what he is going through, and the support that he needs from me, and just to thrive, to be the best version of himself. I remember actually, I had a friend come to our tiny 500 square foot house once. We lived in this little tiny like Spanish bungalow. I was pregnant with Amelie. We had Zuri. It was this little tiny 1-bedroom. Our bed fit from wall to wall, and Zuri slept in a pack and play at the foot of our bed. And I remember she came over and she kind of just like looked around, and she said to me, she's like, so like, when is Dustin going to get a real job? Like, when are you guys going to get like a real house? And I remember like, she meant well, and I love her dearly. She totally meant well. But for me, that season of life was not about me wanting a big house. It's not about me needing like him to have this quote unquote real job or this successful job. This was about me supporting him and fulfilling a dream that he had. And if that meant that I sacrificed not living in a big house, then so be it. If that meant me sacrificing him being out on the road fulfilling that, then so be it. And I was in a good place of heart. That wasn't something that I felt like was ruining us. I felt like it was bringing us closer together. So now I'll go back to the point that it takes two people to fully commit to each other in order to have a successful marriage. Because when you sacrifice your needs and your wants and your desires in order to support your spouse, if your spouse is not simultaneously filling you up, then you will dry up and you'll have nothing left to give. And when it comes to love that you're giving to your spouse, it is not self-seeking. So if you're coming into it with the perspective of, I'm not going to be self-seeking in this, like, how can I serve him? If he's simultaneously doing that back, then it's going to work because my needs will be met, and I don't have to worry about my needs being met because they're met by him not being self-seeking, right? And his needs are being met. He doesn't have to worry about that because as long as I'm not self-seeking, then I'm pouring into him. Does that make sense? All right. The next one is, it is not easily angered. I feel like this just takes understanding. Like, I don't know, just always being in a place of understanding and knowing whose team you're on. If you're on the same team, then don't let anger rule you. It's okay to fight. Like me and Dustin, our personalities are natural avoiders. Not that avoiders are better than fighters. It's just a different way of dealing with conflict. Either way, both types of people still feel anger, right? Like some just scream, and some, for us, if we feel that anger, we kind of internally process, and then we might talk about it later. It might come out a little bit later, a little different way, but we still need to communicate. We just don't scream at each other. So honestly, I feel, if I feel mad about something, then the first thing I do is I think, okay, he's on my team. Is what I'm mad about bigger than our team? And the answer is usually no, because usually it's something like the cabinet doors are left open, and I could get all pissed off and that, because that irritates me, and I could scream at him, and I could say like, why the heck can't you just close the freaking cabinet doors? And I could like, tear him down because of it. Like, I don't understand why I can't do something so simple, like I could totally rip him apart for it. Like the list goes on about the things that I could scream about in anger, or I could just close them because I'm on his team and I'm his supporter. And if closing doors is something I'm good at, then I can come alongside him and close the cabinet doors in the same way that he picks up my slack. You know what I mean? So if anger is something that you deal with, just know that it can't show up in your love, like, because love is not easily angered. So you'll have to find a way that, like, the only advice I can give is that when you're feeling angry, to just take a moment before opening your mouth and think about whose team you're on, and if screaming at your teammate is going to make it better or worse. And is there a way that you could show up on behalf of your teammate? You know what I mean? The next one is, it keeps no record of wrongs. Honestly, the easiest way to not keep record of wrongs is to keep a record of rights. Like literally daily think, like always be in a place of gratitude. Like, man, I love that he takes out the trash, or I love that he wants to take me on a date, or I love that he filled up my gas tank, or he got up with the kids, or that, he went and, picked out my favorite dessert, whatever. Like, or that, like for us, he gets up and he turns off the lights after I get in bed, even though the light switch is on my side. Like, there is no room for record of wrongs in your heart when you fill them with records of rights. Like, we're all gonna fail, and we all equally will fail at some time. But if you can stay in a place of constantly keeping in the front of your mind and in the front of your heart all the things that your spouse does right, then those wrongs, they won't hold any weight. The next one is, love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. Honestly, I don't quite know how to answer this one because I don't quite know what it means. But when I read that, the first thing that comes to my mind is that when the faults of your spouse come out, it doesn't delight in the fact that they did something wrong, but it rejoices in that truth has been revealed. Because once truth is revealed, then healing can begin. So that's kind of my only words on that. Whatever. I can't talk. Words are hard. I can't talk. The next one is, it always protects. Oh my gosh, this is a good one. So I was at the salon one day and everyone was talking crap about their husbands. And, it can be so easy to just join in the husband bash, even if it's just to relate, you know what I mean? But I've kind of made it a rule, like I refuse. And I make it a rule that even if I'm frustrated, I don't talk about anything with my girlfriends or my coworkers that I'm not willing to talk about with him first. Because I'm his protector. I'm not his trash talker. And I'm not perfect at this, but it's my go-to. It's something that I always try to practice, and I don't want to, like, I don't want to badmouth him, but there was this one time, oh my gosh. So I was going to go see a chick flick with my girlfriends, and it was during a season where I was not able to get out of the house a ton because there was like a whole season of my life where I always had a nursing baby, or there was always a sick baby, or there was always something, but I could never like get out, and it was during a season when Dustin was traveling a ton and always able to get out and always eating a hot meal and always staying in amazing hotels and traveling the world. And again, I did not let envy take over there. But so during this particular season, I was super pumped. We were going to go see a movie. I think I was working earlier that day, so Dustin had the kids, and I had reminded him like 5 times that day, like, make sure you're home by 6, make sure you're home by 6. Like, I have to leave by 6. And he was like, I got it. And he texted me like, Amelie wants to get her ears pierced. So I'm like, that's awesome. Like, go ahead, as long as you're home by 6. He's like, you got it. 6 o'clock rolls around. I'm like, so like, where are you? And he's like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot. And I'm at like 30 miles away. I'm like, oh my gosh. I was so incredibly frustrated because I had reminded him 100 times. He knew what time I had to leave by. I never get to get out. And now I was going to miss this movie. I was so mad. So I'm like trying to text him like, well, then how long is it going to take you? Like, where are you? And he's not responding. And so I text my friends and I said, I am so frustrated. He's not answering now. Now he's not replying. I don't know where he is. I don't know how long it's going to be. I'm so pissed off. And instead of sending it to them, I sent it to him. Like, of course, classic move, right? And so he just replied with like, I am sorry you are so pissed off. And I know that you did not mean to send that to me, and it's true. I didn't. But it was the perfect thing that had to happen because even as I was about to like let out my frustration to my friends, I got a check in my spirit, like, do not trash talk him. And I knew that, like, I knew not to do that. And I kind of did it anyway. And of course it came back to bite me because it was like teaching me a lesson of, no, I have a conviction over not trash talking him because I'm his protector. And I didn't listen to that, So I'm not saying that you can't go to your friends when you need advice or when you need to vent or when you need to like talk through things, but watch your words. Like, remember that you are designed to protect your spouse. Like, love always protects. Remember that. And so, and that could mean a lot of different ways, but for me, that means protecting his reputation and just his name and his integrity, The next one is, it always trusts. I'm a personal believer that trust should always be given until broken. And then as long as it's in the context of a healthy relationship, it should have the chance to be earned back. So for Dustin, like, I've always trusted him. He's never done anything to break my trust, but I've broken his trust. And that was something that I talked about in last week's episode. And that took time. Like, he took a chance. He took my honesty and he was willing to work on rebuilding trust again. He would probably have to answer this question probably better than I could, but all I know is that without trust, you have accusation, right? And accusation is a death trap for a relationship. If you don't trust, then you just can't last. Like, if you don't trust, then if you have a hard time trusting your spouse, I would encourage you to get down to the root of why. Like, do you have a real reason to not trust? Are you willing to work toward restored trust? Is it rooted in insecurity? Like, I would just encourage you to get down to the bottom of why, because love always trusts. And if you don't trust, there might be a reason why. And I encourage you to get down to the bottom of why, The next one is always hopes and always perseveres. I think when you can look together at the future with hope and perseverance, then you can overcome any obstacle. Like, we've hit marriage roadblocks, but together we've always looked to the future with hope. We've hit hardcore financial roadblocks, but together we always look to the future with hope. Like, what can we do together to overcome this hurdle? We've hit career roadblocks, but together we've looked to the future with hope. Like, what decisions can we make together to overcome this hurdle in careers, in our careers. But if we didn't have hope when we hit those financial hardships, then we wouldn't have the stamina, I can't say that word, the stamina or the perseverance to keep pushing forward. And if we let our burdens take us down, then we would start blaming each other or making dumb decisions. So when we hit trials, we turn to hope together. And we know that if we turn to hope, then we can overcome anything with perseverance. And the last one, love never fails. Man, it's so true. Like, truly, love never fails. If your marriage is on the rocks and you and your spouse are left just wondering why or what you can do about it, I just encourage you to turn toward what love looks like. And I feel like it's so like amazingly spelled out in 1 Corinthians 13. So go read it, like read what it looks like, look inside and see where you can show love in ways that that love was designed to look like. Like go through 1 Corinthians 13, get a real practical, tangible, like talk about it with your spouse, communicate with your spouse. Like how can you, what areas in your marriage do you feel like in those topics are you failing at? Do you guys always turn to anger? Is there a lot of pride in your marriage? Are you guys hopeless? Like what is it that you feel like are your roadblocks? And try to come up with a plan to practically tackle those things. I think that one of like another really good way to improve in those areas is by communicating with your spouse on how you receive love. If you don't know how you receive love and give love, then I encourage you to read the 5 love languages. It's just a really good book that breaks down the 5 fundamental ways that people receive love and give love. And I have to be honest, it took me probably 10 years for me to really hone in on how I receive love, because we were given this book, The 5 Love Languages, our wedding venue gave it to us as a gift. Super cool. And we read it as soon as we got married. And I was honestly like all of them, all 5 of them, because it is physical touch, words of affirmation, gifts, quality time, and acts of service. And I remember saying to him all the time, like, I feel like it's all of them. Like, if you tell me that you love me, but you don't hug me, then I'm not going to feel loved. And if you hug me, but you don't do anything for me, then I'm not going to feel loved. And if you do things for me, but you don't tell me that I'm pretty, I'm not going to feel loved. Like, I felt like I needed all of them equally. And I stood that to the grave. I took that for 10 years. I'm like, I need all of them. And what a brat, right? But he kept telling me over and over, you can't have all of them. That's not how people are wired. And it wasn't until I kind of got into the Enneagram and I discovered that I think it's common for my personality type as a 9 who sees all perspectives and sees all angles. I kind of just was able to relate to every one of them. Therefore, I thought that I needed all of them. And it wasn't until I had the absence of one where it felt like, okay, no, that is how I feel love. Like, and it wasn't until honestly, when I went back to work and then coming home and the house was like a mess and me feeling like anger, like when that would happen. Cause it's like, well, if you love me, like, how come you're not showing up in this way? Like, how come you're not doing these things? You know, how come you're not cleaning up all this stuff? And had I come home from work to a gift every day, or the fact that I came home and there was not gifts every day, I know it's not the gifts. And if I came home from work every day and he didn't, tell me how pretty I looked, I don't feel any less loved. But when he would show up and like take care of tangible needs and like do acts of service, I would feel so loved and I would feel so much relief. And I'm like, man, he really sacrificed to do this stuff. Like, I appreciate it. And so I finally got down to it. My love languages are acts of service and quality time. I love quality time. I would way rather hang out one-on-one than him buy me something or tell me how amazing I am or whatever. So I encourage you to get down to the ways that you receive love, how you give love, and go through 1 Corinthians 13 and see what areas are some tangible ways that you can show up for your spouse and ways that you feel like you need them to show up for you. Now, I think that all of this looks different in different contexts of relationship. This is just simply my encouragement for 2 people who might feel lost in their relationship and just a way to find your way back toward restoration. So I hope this helps, and I hope that you guys are enjoying this marriage series, and tune in next week for a Q&A with me and Dustin. And until next time. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I hope that you found this episode inspiring or encouraging and just life-giving. And as always, I appreciate any and all positive feedback, keynote positive feedback. So tag me, message me, go on iTunes and leave a review, rate, subscribe, because that's how podcasts stay alive. And I didn't even mean to rhyme there, so that works. So yeah, you can find me on Instagram at beautifully.intentional. And that's where I hang out. That's where you can kind of see me in my own personal life. And yeah, so thank you so much for listening in. Until next time.